Siemens will say, yeah, we have all that. Well, they
Yeah.
don't really, by the way, but they're trying to.
Yeah.
But you're going to pay a fortune if you just say, I'm going to be 100% Siemens, because they're locking you into the proprietary. They're not trying to standardize you to something that's open.
Yeah.
They're trying to lock you into more proprietary software that they can then they can gouge you on the pricing. Same thing with Allen Bradley and these other vendors.
Yeah.
So the goal is to take manufacturing out of the 80s.
Growing a business requires a holistic approach that extends beyond sales and marketing. This approach needs alignment among people, processes, and technologies. So if you're a business owner, operations, or finance leader looking to learn growth strategies from your peers and competitors, you're tuned into the right podcast. Welcome to the WBS Podcast, where scalable growth using business systems is our #1 priority. Now, here is your host, Sam Gupta.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the WBS Podcast. I'm Sam Gupta, your host and principal consultant at the independent ERP and digital transformation consulting firm Elevate IQ. The newer technologies seem to have a claim of being easier without requiring the complexity of database programming. The reality is that newer technologies have a place and they are suitable for those use cases. But that does not make database programming any inferior. They both have a place depending upon the need for transactional integrity. The OT and industrial space is especially unique with various types of datasets. So how is the state of industrial data as of today? In today's episode, our guest, Mike Bowers, discusses the state of data of industrial systems. He also discusses the evolution and differences of various technologies such as JSON and XML, SQL versus NoSQL, databases, and MQTT versus traditional protocols. Finally, he shares the importance of data and why manufacturers need to adopt newer methods of collecting data from edge devices to drive real business value. Let me introduce Mike to you. Mike Bowers is the chief architect at Faircom with over 35 years of experience in software development and architecture. As the driving force behind Faircom's architecture and product roadmaps, Mike specializes in high-performance NoSQL and SQL databases, IIoT platforms, and legacy system modernization solutions. His wealth of knowledge extends to topics like database revolution, manufacturing 4.0, IIoT, edge computing, and data integration. With a deep understanding of the tech landscape, he actively contributes to the development of industry standards through his membership in INCITS Technical Committee focusing on SQL and GQL. Mike's insights resonate particularly well with audiences comprising CEOs, IT managers, software architects, software engineers, and control engineers. With that, let's get to the conversation. Hello, Michael. Welcome to the show.
Oh, I'm glad to be here. Thank you, Sam.
And I'm super glad to have you as well. Anytime I have anybody from the Industry 4.0 community, OT community, there's always a little bit of, healthy tension, which I enjoy personally overall in terms of the architecture and the debates. So this is going to be fun for me. Just to kick things off, if my audience may not know you, do you want to start with your quick intro as well as your current focus, Michael?
Yeah, so I've been doing this for a long time, about almost 40 years.
40 years, long time, man.
That is a long time. And I've had a lot of experience in the manufacturing industry. Early in my career, I worked at Mitsubishi Silicon America, which is I wore the bunny suits in the fabs.
Oh my goodness, that is so cool.
Yeah. And so I was in charge there of actually managing a whole new factory. We built a factory from scratch. It's called an Epi factory. Anyway, we built that, and I was in charge of all the automation for that factory.
Yeah.
And then, and later on in the podcast, I'll tell you a story from Mitsubishi because we also brought in an ERP system
to
integrate with all the manufacturing. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll share that later. And So I worked there. I also worked in agriculture, in manufacturing and agriculture, building equipment to manage hay production and gathering, harvesting the hay, stacking the hay, taking these 1-ton bales and smashing them down for export. I wrote lots of automation for that. Built robots for that industry, and then I worked in the freightliner. Building trucks, and I wasn't building the trucks. I was in the automation side of that and the engineering side. So I did that. Plus, then I worked in the database industry, which I currently do now. I've been a software developer for about 25 of those years. In the last 15 years.
It's a long time to be software developer.
Yeah. So doing software development for manufacturing, for IT, and then now I focused on last 15 years on the database industry. And I work for a database company right now. We build database software at Faircom, and we deliver IoT solution based on that database.
Interesting.
So I'm the chief architect at Faircom. So I've written a couple of books, HTML and CSS books, back in 2007 that are published. And so got kind of wide variety of technology things. But obviously a technical person. And my role as a technical person is grown into bridging the gap between the engineers and the executives. And that's what I currently do as the chief architect. I have meetings with executives all the time and the product, bridging the gap so we can design solutions that meet our customers' needs.
Very interesting story. So I think there are going to be many layers that we are going to take, and some of those layers are not going to be, consistent with what we discussed. So this is going to be fun for you as well. Just a little heads up, Mike.
All right.
But before we do that, we have one of these standard questions that we ask every single guest that come on the show, and that is going to be your perspective on business growth.
Yes, business growth is so important, and data is really important to grow business because with the right data, you know where to grow your business. That's one of our challenges at my current company is, getting the right information about where the market is, where can we tweak our product to fit the market better. That's really hard. And so, information is important. And in manufacturing, information is really important too, so that you can build the right processes, tune your processes. So to grow your business, of course, you want to lower costs. That's a given. But you also, to do that, you need to know how to budget for the right equipment to manufacture your product more efficiently. And you need to calculate equipment efficiency. So overall equipment efficiency is super important. So OEE is important. And one of the biggest challenges I found to grow a business is the CEO and the executive team. They need to know really how much is everything costing, what kind of inventory levels are going through the system. And that means lots of data tracking to know what's going through, how fast it's going through, where the bottlenecks are. And you need to get data out of that manufacturing equipment. And that data has been trapped there by all these proprietary protocols. So manufacturers and the executives are held hostage by the cost of getting data from the equipment they buy. If they could get that data more cheaply, then they could get OEE, they could track their inventory better, they could track the equipment maintenance better, they could predict when equipment is going to fail. So that kind of information is where I've been focusing my career for the last 5 years, is how do we get that data automatically from the equipment into the ERP systems where the executives live so they can make smart decisions.
That's very interesting. So we are going to peel some layers there. We have had many different conversations with different executives. Every executive is going to have different needs. Every company, every industry has different problems. They have different appetite for information as well, right? So we are going to discuss all of that. But before we do that, one question that I wanted to ask, because you keep emphasizing on this whole notion of database. And database, in my mind, has a very different place overall, right? I always joke about this, that anybody who has a laptop can code these days. They can create programs. Similarly, anybody who has camera, they can probably create movie as well. But there are only going to be so many good movies out there in the market. So going to the similar, concept here overall from the database perspective, right? And Mike, I don't know what all you have coded in your entire life. I have very similar background. I coded a lot in my life. Okay, I architected a lot, and I hear all sort of arguments, the newer development patterns, how every single developer is trying to claim how easy technology has become, but that does not seem to be the case, at least for me, based on what I
Right.
see generally. Okay, so one of the challenges, and this is a shift. Okay, if anybody has coded in 1890s, maybe 2000s, it was very different. The way even the programming world has evolved a lot. Okay, so if you look at any of the newer, technology, newer tools, one of the things that they do is they ignore the whole aspect of database. They feel that database is not relevant at all. For example, let's say if you look at any of the web technologies, okay, they are going to argue how cool these widgets are, how cool these tools are. Every single SaaS technology out there is super cool, but they don't necessarily understand how to make the communication at the database level. And typically, that's where you get the information. That's where you get the intel. The reconciling two databases, even as of today, is a very different problem, right? Designing an application that is going to be very database driven is very, 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 very challenging. So I know I spoke a lot there. Now tell me your perspective in terms of what you think, because obviously you have spent a lot of time in the programming world.
Oh yeah. Database is one of those necessary evils you have as a programmer because you got to store your data somewhere.
Yeah.
Even if you're working with an API, that
Yeah.
API you're talking to has to
Yeah.
store its data somewhere. And so I've worked with all kinds. Well, I was programming in the 80s and the 90s and
Yeah.
the 2000s and all the way to today. And what's changed is that now we have the ability to talk to HTTP APIs using
Okay.
real simple protocols like
Yeah.
JSON. JSON is a game changer because
Yeah.
it's so simple
Yeah.
and humans can read it.
Yeah.
Everybody can read a JSON document, no matter how technical you are, because it's just text and you can look at it and go, oh, I know what that is.
Yeah.
And because of that, you can send JSON documents to a server
Yeah.
and tell it what to do. And
Yeah.
then it'll give you JSON back and tell you the answers to your questions. So having a new database query language that you can work with the database over JSON changes the game. And that started about 8-10 years ago with MongoDB.
Yeah.
And I was right there at the very beginning of that whole NoSQL revolution. I was a big part of that, actually. Went to conferences. I spoke at all these conferences. That's why Faircom recruited me to work for them, because I'm an expert in that whole area.
Yeah.
And I'm an expert in SQL databases too, because that's what you used for so many years.
Yeah.
So what I did was I learned that you need to have an API on top of a database that works like a web API. All the developers you just talked about love these web APIs because it makes their life easy.
Yeah.
Can you do that on a database? Well, Mongo got close.
Yeah.
They created a sort of a JSON API, and it's kind of complicated and it's a little messy, but because it was better than anything else out there, it's the fifth most popular database in the world.
Yeah.
Well, what I've done is at Faircom, I've created a new API for the Faircom database, which has been Faircom database has been around 40 years. Very powerful database, proven, used worldwide by Fortune 500 companies. Very powerful. But we didn't have a good JSON API. Now we do, and it's even easier than Mongo. And my goal is to make the easiest API for a developer to use so that they could get their data in and out of the database using a web service, just like they do everything else.
Yeah.
And now it's easy, and they like it. Developers are just loving this new API. So that's the idea, is to get everything API enabled so that you can quickly develop. And quickly develop means lower costs, because these developers are so expensive.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so if you can build it at lower cost, you can also build it faster. Then you get time to market. But we learned, though, that even though we have now this really powerful data, we've had this database forever and it's super powerful, but now we have this easy API on top of it.
Yeah.
That's not enough for manufacturing, because really our customers have told us, we don't want to write code. If you really want to reduce costs, go to a no-code solution.
Yeah.
And so that's where we've moved our product. We have an edge product that is, you just simply plug it in and you point and click, and you can configure a way to gather data from equipment. So it takes all those proprietary protocols that manufacturing has, and it's so expensive to convert these proprietary protocols from each vendor, like Siemens and Allen Bradley and all these other vendors, and get Mitsubishi PLCs, you name it. There's just dozens of these products, and they all are proprietary. How do you get these proprietary protocols to speak a common language?
Yeah.
Well, first off, the old question you would ask 20 years ago is, well, what common language? There is none. It's all proprietary.
Yeah.
Well, today there is a common language, and it's JSON.
Yeah.
JSON is universal, and there's even a common protocol now.
Yeah.
MQTT.
Yeah.
So there's also another one that's popular called OPC-UA.
Yeah.
So if you can get all these proprietary protocols from these vendors to speak JSON and work over MQTT and work with OPC-UA, then you can have a universal translator. That bridges gets data out of anything, and now you just point and click in a UI. No developer, and data flows. Now you can get data out of those equipment that's trapped there and get it to the ERP system, get it to the MES system, get it to any system you have in the IT world, in the manufacturing world, without software developers. And that is a game changer.
Yeah, I mean, that does seem to be like a game changer. But the space that we live in, to be completely honest, Mike, especially in the executive realm, in the SMB space, they don't have time to get into any sort of technology. I mean, that's the sentiment that we get, right? Regardless of whether you are going to have, and it's not just that the coding or the code is going to be a problem. For them, they just don't want any technical problems whatsoever. Okay, they don't have the patience, the attention, because when you have a customer or the customer order, knocking your door, the only thing you think about is how do we deliver? Okay, you don't want to get into any of the technical problems. You would rather hand that off to somebody who kind of know what they are doing. Touching back on some other comments, and I have done a lot of work in the NoSQL, the whole debate that NoSQL is going to change everything. It's going to replace SQL databases or whatever. I mean, there have been a lot of debates, right, around that as well. So again, I'm trying to understand your take on that in terms of where you sort of stand, right? Because these things are always hard in general. So overall, my take on this is these things are always, I mean, the newer concepts, it's not that NoSQL all of a sudden became visible in the market. NoSQL technology was there. It's just that the way we developed the technology before, it was very different, practice, because at that time, things mattered differently. I'll tell you a little bit more about that so that you follow what I'm trying to say here, right? So, for example, let's say if you are looking for any sort of guaranteed application, when we look at the transactional reliability, okay, some of the financial applications, for example, let's say if you look at any of the ERP systems, there are very few that have switched to a NoSQL database, okay, even in 2024. And there is a reason. And the reason is not that they don't want to change or there is fundamentally anything wrong about them. They have different problem. Okay, when you get into the accounting, finance, even a dollar matters. Okay, it does not matter in social media. Nobody cares, whether you saw my like when I liked on LinkedIn or not. Okay, one like missing is okay, but 1 cent missing is not okay in the accounting world, because you have to track every single dime. So when you are looking at the transactional processing, when you are looking at the financial reconciliation, these are very different problems, right? So that's where I sort of stand overall in this argument about, the technology has changed. Also, this whole argument about JSON, great technology, much simpler. But even before, you had XML. So XML was very readable. Business people could read. I grew up in very investment banking sort of area, and there literally business people were reading XML, and they do as of today as well. So sure, JSON is going to be less verbose, but as such, you had things such as XML, so they have not changed anything as such from the programming perspective. So again, I spoke a lot. Maybe you share your perspective in terms of where you stand.
So the SQL versus NoSQL debate. The real debate is do you have a transaction database engine or not?
Exactly.
Because financial transactions and manufacturing is the same as financial. You're not going to say, oh, I lost a product here, I lost a product there. Oh, well, I didn't record that data. Think about quality. If you have returns and you have to process, refunds to customers, or you have to process quality. And you have, all the big issues that come with quality and recalls. Recalls are huge.
Yeah.
You guys say, well, I didn't track the data for 3 months. Sorry, we just lost the data. We have a big customer, one of the major top automobile manufacturers in the United States.
Yeah.
And they're working with us because we don't lose data.
Yeah.
We have a transactional engine
that
never loses data. Well, they're using some of these NoSQL kind of things, and they're losing data.
Yeah.
Why? Because, like you said, Mongo is great for tracking likes, and it can track it. But the reality is, what if you could have a NoSQL engine and a SQL engine all on a transactional database that never loses data? So you get the best of all worlds, and that's what the Faircom database is. We are a SQL database. We are also a JSON database, NoSQL, on the same data with a transaction engine that never loses data, like Oracle or Postgres or MySQL or SQL Server. Whereas we have the same reliability that the traditional SQL has. We have the same SQL capabilities they have, but we also have the NoSQL JSON APIs that make all the difference for fast development. The problem was Mongo, when they built theirs, they just threw out the baby with the bathwater and said, well, who needs transactions? Now they'll claim they have them, but when you actually look under the hood and see what they're really doing, they really don't have them. Because their engine fundamentally is not transactional. It's eventually consistent, which means it's a nice euphemism for saying it's never consistent. Unless you don't do anything. If you never do anything in it, then it's consistent. But if you change a single thing, it's eventually consistent because eventually all the servers get updated. They all kind of, but you're not consistent if you're eventually consistent. So that's my take on it. I think there are use cases that Mongo and a Couchbase can do being eventually consistent, and you're fine. But if you care about your data, you want something transactional that you guaranteed. And that's what the Faircom database does. And we give you the best of all the worlds. And that's our claim to fame. And we built our IoT system right on top of our embedded database. That's transactional and NoSQL. So you get all the best of all the worlds in our IoT solution.
No, that is very interesting. So I'm going to provide one more layer here. Overall, we are going to compare this with, some more things in how they have evolved. So, for example, IT versus OT obviously is a very, very, very classic debate, that I don't know how many times I have done on this particular podcast. So if you look at in IT as well, there are many different sort of, and I don't know how I want to word this. So I like to define this as more of the areas of either software or development. So, for example, let's say if you look at any of the ERP-centric, space, which is going to be your ERP, any of the enterprise software category, which is going to be your ERP, it's going to be your WMS, TMS, anything and everything that falls under that enterprise software category. Then you have slightly more e-commerce category, In the e-commerce world, things are very different, You need to be very custom in nature. And the reason for that is because everything is sort of driven by web and, the way your URLs are mapped. You can't have a product like ERP because it's all driven by user experience. And that's why everybody has to develop their own web front, even though people are sort of trying to productize there as well. But even today, I mean, if you look at any companies, they all have their own sort of way of developing the website. Now, going 40 years back in the ERP world, so there were times when everybody was trying to develop their own ERPs because they felt that going custom is what is going to make you competitive in the market. That's where you get the competitive difference, right? So I call this as more of the face of productization, evolution in technology, in understanding of the technology, This is the same thing that has happened when, I don't know whether you have watched the movie related to McDonald's, the way McDonald's, grew, Before that, everybody was used to have that custom experience in the restaurant. Nobody really believed that McDonald's formula could work, but they were the only ones who actually championed the idea of franchise, right? So this whole mindset of productization, that has happened in every single industry. That has happened even in the ERP. Today in 2024, you don't have a lot of companies developing your custom software, but OT is different right now. OT, everybody's talking about custom software. So now the question that I'm going to pose for you, Mike, is when you look at the e-commerce, in the e-commerce world, custom software makes sense. They have a need for that. In your opinion, when you look at OT, does OT have a need to develop the custom software for each individual process? Is this always going to be like this, or do you see this getting evolved as more of the enterprise software category?
Yeah, I love your question. And the answer is they're spending a fortune in manufacturing doing custom software. And that's, in fact, to be honest, because I've been doing this since the 1980s, I feel like manufacturing is still kind of stuck back in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
And so that really the MQTT and the JSON movement, the IoT, the Industry 4.0 movement, they're all about getting you to standards, standard protocols, so that you can build standard software that works everywhere. Because custom is, there's a place for custom, but not in manufacturing. There are niches in manufacturing where you might have a custom. For example, you might calculate overall equipment efficiency a custom way that works for your process. But you need software. You need the data collection to be automatic.
Okay.
You don't want to write custom code to do that anymore. It's too expensive. I've been on those projects. You just want to plug. You want to put an IoT platform in your manufacturing, and the IoT platform is standard. It follows standards. And you just plug it in. It uses MQTT, it uses JSON, OPC UA. It talks to Modbus and all these protocols. I don't want to load us down with too many protocols, but it talks these proprietary protocols. And it's a universal translator. It needs to take it out of those proprietary protocols into a standard that you can plug and play, and it delivers it right to your ERP, to your MES. Plug and play is the future of manufacturing. And it's got to be vendor agnostic. Because right now, if you are a Siemens company and you buy Siemens PLCs, Siemens will say, yeah, we have all that. Well, they don't really, by the way, but they're trying to. But you're going to pay a fortune if you just say, I'm going to be 100% Siemens. Because they're locking you into the proprietary. They're not trying to standardize you into something that's open. They're trying to lock you into more proprietary software that they can then they can gouge you on the pricing. Same thing with Allen Bradley and these other vendors. So the goal is to take manufacturing out of the 80s and 90s and move them into the 2020s, where you have open standards that then everyone can plug and play. And so yes, I believe we have to get to that's what I'm doing with Faircom, is building this IoT platform to do that very thing. And I'm not here to do a sales pitch on our platform. Really, I really believe that this is the future of manufacturing. And the reason why, it goes back to my days at Mitsubishi Silicon America, when I was leading the integration of this factory. The silicon industry adopted a messaging queue technology. It was a different technology than MQTT because it was before MQTT. But if MQTT would have existed back then, we would have used MQTT. And the idea is you just push messages in a standard message format to a centralized broker, and it delivers that to anyone who wants to subscribe. It's this publish subscribe model is the genius of how the entire silicon industry integrates their factories. They were 20, 30 years ahead of the rest of the industry. And now the rest of the manufacturing industry is catching up and going, wow, we should do the same thing. And that's where MQTT comes in. So that's how I'm so passionate about this. And I brought this to Faircom, that we need to have an MQTT broker, which we built our own broker so that we could control the destiny of that broker. We integrated it totally inside of our database, or our database inside the broker. However you want to look at it, they're one thing. And so we've got a broker and a database. Then we built our APIs, our JSON APIs on top of all that, and then our web interface on top of all that. So you have a fully integrated platform. It's not a database. It's not a broker. It's not just an API. It's all of the above in one thing. Compared to other IT platforms, they throw an open source broker in there and an open source API, an open source database in there. And they say, well, if you want something good, go start buying separate third-party databases from another vendor. You need a fully integrated solution if you're going to accomplish this goal. So we built something unique to accomplish the goal I discovered, back in the years, like 25 years ago when I was at Mitsubishi, because I wanted to bring what I learned there to a new level. That totally integrated platform, because it cost millions and millions of dollars for us to build the automation for that factory because of all the proprietary software. Well, now if they would have had Faircom's Edge product, they would have just plugged and played, and it would have been a couple $100,000 max instead of millions. So it's a 10 times reduction in cost and 10 times reduction in time. you could have been, and part of the story at Mitsubishi was by the time we built that factory, it took too long. And now the silicon market just goes ups and downs. And by the time we built it, the market was saturated with the new product that we were building.
Yeah.
Because if we could have been there 2 years earlier, we'd have made a fortune. So time to market is huge.
Yeah, it is.
And so an IoT platform delivers time to market because you don't have to write custom stuff.
Yeah, no, that's very interesting. So let's talk about, some of the companies where, you have found this problem, right? So obviously, Mitsubishi is going to be a really giant company in general. And I don't know if their problems is going to be relatable to any of the SMB companies. I mean, they are probably going to have very similar problems as well. But I don't know if they, number one, understand that they have a problem. Number two, can they really afford? Obviously, that is always going to be a challenge, right? If you have a compelling pressing problem, then companies are willing to spend money, right? So in the spaces where we work, we have had all different flavors. Okay, there are companies, slightly bigger companies, I guess, they sort of understand the value of OT and they are willing to invest in that. There are companies where, and I'm talking about discrete manufacturing, I think we were discussing this in the pre-show as well, that process manufacturing, I think they have a real problem because they need to solve these problems. And sometimes those problems are more compelling than your business system, than ERP. They don't care for ERP. They care for the real process problems because that is helping them with the real product, real, manufacturing efficiency. So they are really excited about that. Discrete manufacturing, mixed reaction in our experience. Okay. So if I look at very small shops, sometimes they are worried about, hey, I don't want to connect these machines to the internet. Okay. Some people are standing there. Some other people, they have some sort of ignition platform. Maybe, they are doing some sort of analytics, but that's not the real integration. And when we ask them, okay, do you really care? They, nah. I mean, our problem is different. I mean, we have different problems here. That's not going to help us. They are there. Slightly bigger companies, I guess, they are trying to sort of get into this and trying to see what they can do. So I don't know what you notice. Maybe talk about different industries where you have seen the real problems, and if you have any sort of stories around that, that'll be helpful as well.
Yeah. So one was this major automobile manufacturer. We've been working with them for 5 years.
Yeah.
And in the beginning, I remember one story. We were in their research and development facility, and the IT guy comes over, and we were working with the director of the facility, and his name was Harry. And so we're showing him how our IoT platform can do automatic gather this data. Yeah. And so this IT guy comes over and he says, Harry, your guy stood me up. He ghosted me. I came here to get data, and he didn't even show up for the meeting because the OT guys and the IT guys don't even want to talk to each other. And we're talking to the OT guys. And so Harry goes to us, he goes, well, go talk to Faircom here, because Faircom can get you the data you need because we have the IoT platform that automatically gets it. So we showed the IT guy, and he goes, whoa. And it was funny because the OT guys that stood him up, one of them was in our group that we were talking to. So they needed, the IT guys are dying to get certain kinds of data out, and they can't even get it.
Yeah.
Now the IT guys make classic mistakes, like at this automobile manufacturer. They buy these big systems like ThingWorx, and they think if I could just plug in this massive system, it'll solve all our problems. Well, it's not true. The real problem you're trying to solve is get the data out of the equipment.
Yeah.
And then you don't need to throw it in some massive system because they spent millions buying ThingWorx and didn't even use it. Doesn't even work.
Yeah.
It's just too complicated, too big, too slow. And so this company has decided to go with smaller point solutions.
Yeah.
And so another use case was they're having problems with recalls. They're having problems with recalls. But all automobiles have recalls, right? So you have to track your data. And they're having problems with getting the data. This company is standardized on MQTT and JSON. Yeah. So this is a major automobile manufacturer, and that's their thing, is JSON and MQTT. Yeah. Every piece of equipment has to generate JSON in this factory standard format. So the other part is unifying the JSON format so that every piece of equipment speaks the same language. So now you can plug and play.
Yeah.
Well, the problem is their broker they're using is not Faircom's broker at the moment. They standardized years ago on a different one, and it's losing data.
Yeah.
And they're sending data to the cloud, and it's losing data in the cloud. So they realize that they need to have a mission critical transaction broker that sits right next to the piece of equipment, collects the data locally, and then guarantees delivery to these less capable brokers. Even though they might be popular, they're not mission critical.
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing right now with this company is we're gathering data locally because our broker is mission critical and transactional because we have a database in there. It will not lose data. And no matter how long you're disconnected from a target, if the cloud's down for 10 days, it doesn't matter. We gather the data locally and we deliver it later. So that's another issue is how do you collect data locally and use it locally without having to go to the cloud?
Yeah.
Another company came to us and said, we send data to the cloud and the cloud goes out on us because, the network goes down or the cloud becomes available or the service in the cloud goes out.
Yeah.
And then the data's lost. And then they go, and also it's slow. By the time you take data in the factory and you get it to the cloud, it takes a second or two to get it up there and to come back. Well, what if I'm trying to collect 10,000 pieces of data a second?
Yeah.
I can't do one a second. I need to do 10,000. Well, that's where you have a local IoT platform collecting the 10,000 pieces of data a second.
Yeah.
And then it can forward a summary of it to the cloud.
Yeah.
Independently and safely and never lose anything. And that's what Faircomp's IoT platform does. So we collect data locally, we can aggregate it, we can deliver it asynchronously wherever you want, reliably, without losing the data. We store it, we forward it without losing it. So we had companies do that. That's been a big issue for them. Small companies often have these point solutions in the cloud. You buy say you buy a sensor, and the sensor is now collects this data to the cloud.
Yeah.
That's a new common model. The problem is the company goes, well, I have 10 sensors from different manufacturers.
Yeah.
They all go to the cloud and they don't talk to each other. How do I get the 10 sensor data in the same database so I can work with it?
Yeah.
And so the answer is, well, put it like Faircomp's IoT solution right in the factory. We collect the data locally. You don't have to go to the cloud. And now you have it all locally. And we use the standards. So we can get the data from the cloud and bring it back to the factory, or we can collect it locally and keep it in the factory.
Yeah.
And then deliver to the cloud.
That's very interesting. So I don't know, Amisi, if you have anything else that you would like to cover, that you wanted to cover, that we could not cover as part of the episode. We are close to our time, so just want to give you an opportunity if you had anything in mind that you wanted to share.
Yeah, I wanted to tell another story about Mitsubishi.
Yeah.
It's an ERP story. So while we were there, we built the factory successfully. I got all the automation done. That's all right. Then they moved me into the director of technology at Mitsubishi, and we got a new CEO. And he thought if we got rid of our proprietary ERP system that we built from scratch.
Yeah.
And he said, let's just go and standardize on SAP. So we spent millions of dollars to buy SAP, and then we had this huge project to reintegrate everything with SAP.
Yeah.
The moral of the story in the end was we got it working. Our team, I was on the IT team there, and IT and OT were kind of combined back then, so it wasn't separate. And we got it all done, but the CEO was complaining like, well, my reports are worse than they were before.
I've seen that before.
Right? And the reason is, you can't just throw software at a problem if you don't know what your problem really is. And that's what happened here. The CEO thought the problem was I need a good ERP system. That was not the right answer. That was the wrong answer. The real thing was the processes. We need to collect the right data and put it to the right process.
Yeah.
And if you spent the millions of dollars doing that, it doesn't matter whether you're a custom ERP or if you already built a custom one, you can enhance it.
Yeah.
But when you buy one off the shelf, you need to know what data you're trying to get, what processes you're trying to do, and what you're trying to accomplish with the data, and to make that happen. But one of the challenges, so that was a failure. That whole ERP shift failed because, we succeeded. We shifted to a new ERP, but it didn't do any good.
Yeah.
It made things worse.
Yep.
And so over the years, I learned from that lesson. What's really come down for me is things that stop companies from succeeding is it's so expensive to get data out of their systems.
Yeah.
They say, well, let's just try to do something else. The reality is you've got to get the data out of your systems. And so you need a way to do it quickly and easily. And that's what I focused my last 5 years of my life on, is building an IoT platform that can collect that data automatically and easily. So you don't have to sweat bullets and pay a fortune to do it. But once you can collect your data quickly and you can get it wherever you need to go, then you can focus on the process to use the data efficiently. And that will change the business. And so that's my moral of the story is let's standardize on how we get the data. Let's standardize how we deliver the data in open standards using a technology platform that's point and click and gets the job done fast so that you can focus not on collecting the data or focus on pretending not to collect it because it's too expensive. Just collect it and then focus on getting the processes in place to use it so you can get better OEE, get better data for recalls, get better executive reporting, get better equipment maintenance, get on-time delivery for inventory management because the data's there. You're no longer fighting IT to get the data. Like this automobile manufacturer, the IT guy's begging this company, please give me the data. And they can't get it because it's too expensive. Well, that's been my focus for the last 5 years. Let's get rid of that problem. And the data's there. We just plug in an IoT platform and it just flows.
Yeah, no, very interesting. Thank you so much once again. And I don't know if you're going to have any closing advice. Typically, that is the last segment that we do as part of this episode. Do you have any closing advice for our listeners, Michael?
Yeah, I think that the story I just told is my advice. Stop paying custom developers to write custom code to get the data. Get a product that does that for you. Then focus the development effort on using the data intelligently to drive business value.
Yeah, could not agree more. I think great point. Michael, once again, thank you so much for your time. Obviously, you are very knowledgeable and you have been very generous in sharing your insights. My personal takeaway from this conversation is going to be that focus on the processes, focus on what gets you business value. There are many different technologies available in the market. You can do so much, but you need to know which ones to buy. So on that note, Michael, thank you so much for your time and insights.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Sam.
Of course. I cannot thank our guests enough for coming on the show, for sharing their knowledge and journey. I always pick up learnings from our guests, and hopefully you learned something new today. If you'd like to learn more about Mike, head over to faircom.com. It's FAIRCOM.com. Links and more information will also be available in the show notes. Also, don't forget to subscribe and spread the word among folks with similar backgrounds. If you have any questions or comments about the show, please review and rate us on your favorite podcasting platform or DM me on any social channels. I'll try my best to respond personally and make sure you get help. Thank you, and I hope to get you on the next episode of the WBS Podcast.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the WBS Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform so you never miss an episode. For more information on growth strategies for SMBs using ERP and digital transformation, check out our community at WBS.rocks. We'll see you next time.